So no, we did not schedule a ginger to deliver the message on today on purpose. To get out of the way. We're just lucky. That's all the Irish jokes I got today. Okay. So we're actually today we are going to talk about wisdom. Wisdom, which is something I always feel I need a lot more of. And typically when we talk about wisdom, we look at somebody like Solomon. And it's easy to study wisdom where wisdom is present. So we're going to study wisdom where wisdom is lacking. And we're going to be looking at Jehoshaphat to do that. And so if you turn to 2 Chronicles chapter 17, that's where we're going to be spending quite a bit of time today. Let me get there myself. For some reason I did not have it marked. Actually, it's going to be 18. Apologies. One of my verses references 17. But 2 Chronicles 18. So we're going to be studying Jehoshaphat. Now, for those who may not be overly familiar with Jehoshaphat was a king of Judah. So this was after the kingdom split. Right? We have Israel and then we have Judah. Jehoshaphat was the king of Judah at this time. And he was a few generations, about 5 generations from David. We had Solomon, we had Rehoboam, we had a couple of others. We had Asa, and then we had Jehoshaphat. Okay, so that's where we're at right now. Now, if you study any of this time period, you know that a lot of the kings of both Israel and Judah, they weren't very godly. They didn't pursue God. They didn't try to follow the commandments, follow the law, anything else. Jehoshaphat did, to some degree. He didn't do it 100%, but he had a heart for God. And we can see that over in 2 Chronicles 17:3, where when Jehoshaphat is described, he is described as being walking in the ways of his father David. Now, David wasn't his direct father, right? Just the lineage of David. After David came, everybody was compared to David. Are you walking in the ways of David or are you not? And so Jehoshaphat was compared to David and found to be walking in his ways. And in chapter 17, you can see that Jehoshaphat came in and he removed all the Asheroths and all the Baal worship idols and so on and so forth. He did a lot of good in the sight of God's eyes. Okay, so Jehoshaphat is a good person as far as the kings of Judah goes. Now, if you look at Ahab was the king of Israel. And Israel had problems right from the start. Right from Jeroboam, if I'm saying that right, Jeroboam, had problems right from the start. And they always had problems finding a king that would walk in the way of David, who would try to walk with God. And Ahab was no different. In fact, in 1 Kings 16:30, because this account is covered in 2 different locations. It's covered in 1 Kings, and it's covered in 2 Chronicles. But in 1 Kings 16:30, we have Ahab, who is described as someone who did evil in the sight of the Lord more than all who were before him. And that's saying something. More than all who were before him. So this guy is patently bad. He is in no way, shape, or form trying to pursue God, his laws, his statutes, his love, anything else like that. He is living as opposite as you can be, as far as this time goes. And so now we turn over to 2 Chronicles chapter 18. So we have these 2 kings, very, very different kings. We have Jehoshaphat in Judah, who is walking in the ways of David, right? Which means he has a heart for God. He's trying to seek God. And then you have Ahab, who's the king of Israel, who is running away from God as hard as he can. Okay? Wants nothing to do with God. So, verse number 1 in chapter 18 says, Now Jehoshaphat had great riches and honor, and he made a marriage alliance with Ahab. Made a marriage alliance with Ahab. Now, as far as I could read, Jehoshaphat didn't need to make this marriage alliance. Back in 17, it talks about the beginning of Jehoshaphat's reign, where he strengthened Judah against Israel. The Lord blessed him, and he fortified all the cities. It wasn't like Israel was an imminent threat to come and attack him and conquer him. The Lord was giving him peace. And yet Jehoshaphat made a marriage alliance with someone who was not pursuing God at all. Now, a military alliance is what this likely was. That's what a lot of these marriages were. Like, they were military alliances when it came down to it. So you would have one king say, I want to make an ally out of you. I want us to have a covenant between us, an agreement. If I'm attacked, you're going to come to my aid, and if you're attacked, I'm going to come to your aid, and we're not going to attack each other. And to cement that, we're going to exchange children. Right? Either my daughter's going to marry your son, or your daughter's going to marry my son. And that's how a lot of these alliances were cemented. So my assumption reading this is that Jehoshaphat entered into a military alliance with the king of Israel, with Ahab. And we're not sure why, we're not really told why. But we are told further along in Chronicles that this caused significant issues in the kingdom of Judah. Specifically, the son of Jehoshaphat did not even try to walk in his ways. The son of Jehoshaphat was a horrible king in Judah. And then his son, too, was a horrible king in Judah. Because of the decision that was made right here. Because of a lack of wisdom, a lack of foresight, a lack of understanding that if I enter into a marriage alliance, if I take Ahab's daughter and have her marry my son is not going to walk in my ways. She is going to pull my son off into idol worship, into rebuilding the high places, the Asheroths, etc., that Jehoshaphat had just spent time tearing down and making right with God and reuniting the people with God. His son was going to come in and get rid of all that. And they were going to go right back to where they were before Jehoshaphat, before his father Asa. So that was the first piece that I started reading when I was looking at Jehoshaphat, saying, well, that was not a very smart move. And again, I couldn't read anything in there that would tell me Jehoshaphat needed to do this. Right? He was a strong king. He was blessed by God. He was given peace and rest. He did not need to do this, but he did, and it had consequences that he may not have thought about. That's one. And why did he choose that? He didn't seek any guidance from the Lord. So in decision making, and if you make decisions for a living, you will often hear any decision is better than no decision. Right? You can have severe consequences by not making a decision at all. And so oftentimes any decision is better than no decision. And when you are making a decision, you are making a decision with the information you have available. Now, when you are looking in hindsight, you can say to yourself, oh yeah, that was dumb, I shouldn't have decided that. Right? And I've done that a lot myself. I'm sure lots of you have too. I can look back on my life and go, wow, that was a really questionable decision I made. But in the end, we are imperfect and we are making decisions off of imperfect knowledge. And so we can make the best decision possible, it seems to us, and it doesn't work out like we thought. Right? We had good intentions, we had good information, we made what seemed to be a good decision, and it fell apart. Okay? That stuff happens. When we rely on God for our guidance, when we go back and we weigh our decisions against, does this glorify God? Is this something that is going to increase my relationship with God? Our decisions become better and better as we continue that focus. When we make decisions dependent on our own knowledge, dependent on our own guidance, our decisions will be faulty because we are a faulty people. We are a broken, faulty people. Second, as we continue in verses 4 through 27, Jehoshaphat is talking with King Ahab, and King Ahab is asking him to join in a battle with him against Ramoth Gilead. And Jehoshaphat wants to know what God thinks about this. And so Ahab brings 400 prophets over, and all 400 prophets tell him, yep, God give them into your hand, go for it. And Jehoshaphat wants to know, what does the prophet of the Lord say? See, Jehoshaphat's not a bad person. He's not a bad king. Remember, he walks in the ways of David. He wants to know, he yearns to know what the Lord desires. And so, Ahab sends for the prophet Micaiah. But he warns Jehoshaphat, he says, this guy never says anything good about me. He's going to come here and he's going to tell you bad stuff. So Micaiah comes, and Micaiah prophesies the destruction of Ahab. He says, you're going to lose this battle. And Ahab, you're going to be destroyed. And Jehoshaphat goes to battle anyway. Now, it's one thing to have wisdom to seek the Lord and to seek his guidance. But you're much wiser if you listen to it. Okay? It does you no good to seek guidance if you aren't going to pay attention to it. And so that was another problem that Jehoshaphat had, is that he knew to seek the Lord, but he was easily swayed to go against the guidance of the Lord, to ignore what the Lord said. And so he goes into battle with Ahab. And we have some of that today, where in 2 Timothy 4:3, we hear about people having these itching ears, and they're seeking to hear what they desire, right? I want to hear from you wisdom or guidance, advice that reinforces what I already believe to be true. And that's what Ahab was seeking. That's why he had the 400 prophets, and he never wanted to go to Micaiah, because he wanted to hear advice and guidance that aligned with his particular view, with actions he was already going to be taking. He just wanted to hear good things. And I got news for you. You won't always hear bad things. But most advice is difficult to take. Very rarely have I asked someone for advice and they went, "Nah, Kris, you're doing fine. Keep going." Usually I ask people for advice and they go, "Well," and they take a breath. And that's when I know it's not going to be as happy and rosy as I thought it was going to be. Okay? But over time, as I've conditioned myself to swallow my pride, I've listened to the advice, listened to the guidance, listened to feedback. I have become a better decision maker. I have grown in my relationship with the Lord. I have grown in my relationship with others. I've grown as a person. But swallowing that pride, but looking at yourself and saying, there's a chance that I may not be making the right decision is tough to do. Very, very tough to do. But seeking the guidance, listening to that guidance is very wise. However, here, Jehoshaphat showed a distinct lack of wisdom by failing to listen to the guidance of the Lord. And then we have in verses 28 through 34, Ahab sets Jehoshaphat up. And in that passage, we have Ahab tells Jehoshaphat, "I'm going to go in disguise to fight this battle. But I want you to wear your robes." Now, in battle, what's the goal for the soldiers? It's going to be to end that battle as quickly as possible. The quickest way to end the battle is to take a leader out. If you take out the leader, nobody else knows what to do. There's nobody giving orders. There's no nothing else, right? And frequently, especially in this time, the leaders are the only reason they were going to battle in the first place. If you remove the leader, you remove the will to fight. And so in these battles, they're coming after the king, the general, whoever is in charge on the field, the highest ranking officer. And in fact, the people from Ramoth Gilead were told, do not fight with either great or small, but fight only with the king of Israel. They were looking for the king. Now, I don't know if Ahab got word of this or not. And that's why he dressed in disguise and told Jehoshaphat, no, you go out dressed in robes. But Jehoshaphat again listened to Ahab and went, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. And he went out dressed in his robes. And as we might predict Jehoshaphat got chased. He got mistaken for the king of Israel, and he got chased by these men. And like the hymn says, had the Lord not been on his side, Jehoshaphat would have died running away from this battle. As it was, he cried out to the Lord. The pursuers realized they were pursuing the king of Judah, not the king of Israel, and they turned away. But way in the beginning, when Ahab proposed this, Jehoshaphat, if he had a little bit more wisdom, probably would have said, that sounds really fishy to me. That you're going to dress in plain clothes, and I'm going to go dress in my robes, and we're going to go out, and we're going to fight this battle. Why aren't you dressing in your robes? This is your battle. You just asked me to come. So, again, Jehoshaphat displays a lack of wisdom here. And furthermore, we need to recognize that we can be set up this way as well. I don't know if anybody else here has, but I have. I've been set up to take the fall for something else that somebody wanted to do. And I'll give you an example. It was a long time ago. I was a manager at a Jim's restaurant, and we had a rowdy group of kids. And they weren't bad, they were just rowdy. But they wouldn't leave. And we had an SAPD security guard there. And the security guard, we rounded them all up, we got them outside, but they wouldn't leave the property, they wouldn't leave the premises. And so the security guard looked at me and said, "Are you kicking them out?" And I was like, "Yes, they need to go." And then out came his asp and his gun and everything else, because he wanted to get these kids. He was tired of their attitude, and he was going to thump them. But he needed a reason to thump them. I unwittingly gave him a reason to go thump the kids. Now, that was something that I realized right then and there was a mistake on my part. I should have realized that was coming. I should have been able to tell this particular person was getting super annoyed to the point where he was going to overstep whatever authority he had, and he was going to do stuff to these kids. And I enabled him to do that. And that's not something I'm overly proud of. But we all need to be aware that we can be used. Our intentions can be used. Your faith can be used. I don't know if anybody's heard this, but there's a movement called Christian nationalism. Now that sounds nice, right? A whole Christian nation. I wouldn't mind being a nation of Christians. That's great. Matter of fact, that's something that I'm ardently trying to do. But the idea behind Christian nationalism is to enact laws to make anything else illegal. And that is not what we are called to do. But you may be approached saying, "Hey, if you believe in Christ, why don't you support this effort? Why don't you support making Islam illegal? Or why don't you support making this illegal?" And we need to be careful, because people will use our faith. People will use our relationship, our desire to do God's will, to execute their own agendas that are not aligned with God's will. So we need to be wise in order to catch that. We need to be wise to the ways of men so that we can recognize that trap when it comes. Which is why Jesus tells his apostles, when he sends them out, to be as wise as serpents. Do not go out and be naive. Understand, people are not good. Even you who's sitting here, you are not good. I'm not good. Right? Jesus said there is only one good, and that is God. So we have to acknowledge none of us are good. We cannot be naive in our dealings, in our relationships. That doesn't mean that we're pessimistic, but we can't be naive about it. We're called to be wise. And I understand that applied to just the 72, the 12, but it also rolls down to us today. We also need to be wise in our relationships and wise in our dealings. Now, what else does that impact? Well, about the wisest thing you can do is decide to give your life to Christ. That is the wisest decision that you can possibly make today. that is a decision that will pay off not only for the rest of your life, but for all of eternity. Now, I don't know of any other investment you could possibly make that pays for the rest of eternity. Okay? And even if it did, I wouldn't be here to get it. Because I don't want to be here for the rest of eternity. So if you are sitting in the audience today and you haven't given your life to God, I strongly urge you to consider it. We have places where we can baptize you. We have men capable of baptizing you. If you want to study about being baptized, we'd love to study with you as well. If you have fallen away from Christ, if you have fallen away from God, we would like to talk to you about that too. If you would come up here while we stand and sing.